Inequities in transportation have existed in the United States for decades. Underserved communities like low-income communities and communities of color are often overexposed to the burdens of transportation and have less access to the benefits of transportation. For example, underserved communities are disproportionately threatened by transportation pollution due to proximity to highways and ports, and they are also often farther away from job opportunities with few affordable transportation options. Electric vehicles offer a means to help address past, existing, and future inequities in transportation, but only if public policies are well designed. This chapter of the video series walks through key guidelines for creating equitable EV programs. Before diving in, it's important to be aware of existing experts who have been committed to equitable policy work for decades. Two such experts are EV Noir, an e-mobility and equity-focused consulting group, and the Greenlining Institute, an equity-focused public policy advocacy group with almost 30 years of experience. This video chapter draws heavily on work from these groups, and in particular on Greenlining's Electric Vehicles Equity Toolkit, which is available to the public on their website. Before we get into some policies, let's take a moment to talk about how we understand and define the needs of underserved communities in the first place. An essential early step in designing equitable EV programs is to be clear on the needs of a community so that we can create a program that is truly beneficial. EV Noir emphasizes the importance of understanding that various underserved communities are inherently different in terms of income, language, race, and culture. Engaging effectively requires targeted efforts to understand the unique needs of each community. One way this understanding translates into action is by choosing the right type of program. For example, a rural community where people have driveways or garages but are far from public charging may benefit from a program that helps them afford EVs and install at-home chargers. On the other hand, people living in multifamily buildings who don't have anywhere to install their own chargers may benefit more from electric car share programs or public charging. There are several ways to assess a community's needs, including focus groups, listening sessions, surveys, or interviews with community-based organizations and other relevant community stakeholders. The Greenlining Institute emphasizes the importance of conducting community needs assessments in culturally appropriate ways. This means taking into account the language, literacy level, and other cultural issues and attitudes of the target audience. For efficiency, local governments can look to coordinate community needs assessments with existing efforts. For example, by nonprofit hospitals that already conduct periodic community health assessments. Another essential early step is to coordinate and partner with community-based organizations, or CBOs, that have experience working with specific communities and are often trusted by those communities. Tips to engaging those organizations include reaching out early, following up often, and being clear about the purpose of the partnership. For instance, is the CBO being asked to co-host a public input session, serve on an advisory committee, or something else in service of the policy in question? In addition, it is critical to identify existing collaborations between CBOs and other relevant stakeholders. Understanding this landscape helps prevent duplicating efforts and identifies opportunities for collaboration. Now let's tackle one of the most common barriers to EV adoption: the higher upfront cost of EVs as compared to conventional gas vehicles. EVs in many cases are cheaper to use than gas vehicles over the vehicle's lifetime since, in most cases, fuel and maintenance costs are much lower. But since most EVs are more expensive up front, many lower-income buyers can't access these potential long-term savings. Before getting into different types of programs that help lower the upfront cost of EVs, let's discuss the retail price of EVs. As of the filming of this video series, there are at least 16 electric vehicles with MSRPs under $40,000, and many more competitively priced EVs will soon come to market. Recent models like the Ford Mustang Mach-E and the Volkswagen ID.4 are priced at just above the average new vehicle purchase price. Still, today, most EVs are more expensive upfront than their gasoline vehicle counterparts, which leads us to our discussion on purchase incentives. The Greenlining Institute explains that purchase incentives are most beneficial for underserved communities when they provide value at the point of sale, like with vouchers, instant cash rebates, and sales tax exemptions, as opposed to later on, like with tax credits or reimbursement rebates. Purchase incentives are also more beneficial for underserved communities when they can be applied using vehicles, since many low-income individuals can only afford used vehicles, even with purchase incentives. Publicly funded financing incentives are also a good way to help people afford EVs. One type of financing incentive is a loan loss guarantee, where the state funds a reserve that banks can tap into if individuals default on loans. This allows banks to give loans with a good interest rate to people who wouldn't typically qualify for a loan. Again, making this benefit available for used cars and targeting the program to low-income individuals helps make the program more equitable. Making EVs more affordable is only one part of making EVs accessible, because people will not buy EVs if they don't have somewhere to charge them. The competitive market alone may be unlikely to build chargers in rural communities, low-income communities, and communities of color, where demand for these services is perceived to be low. That's where publicly funded charging programs come in. Let's look at 3 ways local governments can help fill charging gaps. First, publicly funded charging programs can dedicate a certain share of funding for underserved communities or require that a certain share of chargers be installed in underserved communities. At least 27 utilities across 19 states include these types of carve-outs. Leaders in the space, like the Greenlining Institute, Dream Core Green for All, and EV Noir, can be essential in guiding these deployments. Working with local groups who know communities well can be really helpful here. For example, community-based groups could identify central hubs where charging stations would truly serve the community to avoid common pitfalls like building chargers on the periphery of a community where they would actually better serve drivers from other communities. A second option is to provide higher levels of financial support for underserved communities. For example, rebate programs may offer higher rebates to lower-income individuals. Third, building chargers to serve people who live in multifamily dwellings is essential to making EVs accessible. According to the National Multifamily Housing Council, about 60% of households in multifamily dwellings have a household income of less than $50,000. Bringing charging options to people who live in multifamily dwellings will be essential to making EVs an option for many low-income families. Now, let's assume that a needs assessment reveals that a community is located near a highway or a place where many trucks operate, like a port. Trucks and buses are a major contributor to harmful pollution, and any program that supports the electrification of these vehicles could be very valuable for this community. Many highways and ports are located in or near underserved communities, resulting in inequitable health impacts and making electrification of trucks and buses a really important part of addressing inequities in transportation. It's also important that incentive programs themselves are easy to use. One way to do this is to make sure the EV program is aligned with similar existing programs. Disjointed efforts can result in complicated, redundant applications that can deter people from applying for important programs. A universal application to determine eligibility for a variety of programs can make signing up a lot easier. In general, the easier a program is to use, the more accessible and beneficial the program will be. That's it for this chapter. Want to learn more? The Greenlining Policy Institute's Electric Vehicles Equity Toolkit that we mentioned in the beginning of this video chapter includes specific examples of programs and also provides many resources for further research and more information. Also, a report from the Institute for Local Government provides more information and guidelines to help local government officials collaborate with community-based organizations in policy-making processes.